Good morning, everyone. And my name is Karen Dubin. I am the Chief Operating Officer and one of the main facilitators for the Sweet Institute. And I am going to be continuing on in Carl Rogers on Becoming a Person, starting on page 107, what it means to become a person. And I will continue on perhaps till 111. So here we go. What it means to become a person. This chapter was first given as a talk to a meeting at Oberlin College in 1954. I was trying to pull together in more completely organized form some of the conceptions of therapy which have been growing in me. I have revised it slightly. As customary with me, I was trying to keep my thinking close to the grassroots of actual experience in therapeutic interviews, so I drew heavily upon the recorded interviews as a source of generalizations which I make. In my work at the Counseling Center of the University of Chicago, I have the opportunity of working with people who present a wide variety of personal problems. There is a student concerned about failing in college, a housewife disturbed about her marriage, an individual who feels he is teetering on the edge of a complete breakdown or psychosis, the responsible professional man who spends much of his time in sexual fantasies and functions ineffectively in his work, the brilliant student at top of his class who is paralyzed by the conviction that he is hopelessly and helplessly inadequate, the parent who is distressed by his child's behavior, the popular girl who finds herself unaccountably overtaken by sharp spells of Black depression, the woman who fears that life and love are passing her by, and her good graduate record is a poor recompense, the man who has become convinced that powerful or sinister forces are plotting against him. I could go on and on with the many different and unique problems which people bring to us. They run the gamut of life's experiences. Yet there is no satisfaction in giving this type of catalog, for as a counselor, I know the problem as it's stated in the first interview will not be the problem as seen in the second or third hour. And by the 10th interview, it will still be a different problem or series of problems. I have, however, come to believe that in spite of this bewildering horizontal multiplicity, the layer upon layer of vertical complexity, and perhaps only one problem, as I follow the experience of many clients in the therapeutic relationship which we endeavor to create for them, it seems to me that each one is raising the same question. Below the level of the problem situation about which the individual is complaining, behind the trouble with studies or wife or employer, or with his own uncomfortable or bizarre behavior, or with his frightening feelings lies one central search. It seems to me that at the bottom of each person is asking, who am I really? How can I get in touch with this real self underlining all the surface behavior? How can I become myself? The process of becoming. Getting behind the mask. Let me try to explain what I mean when I say it appears that the goal the individual most wishes to achieve, at the end of which knowingly and unknowingly pursues, is to become himself. When a person comes to me troubled by his unique combination of difficulties, I have found it most worthwhile to try and create a relationship with him in which he is safe and free. It is my purpose to understand the way he feels in his own inner world, to accept him as he is, to create an atmosphere of freedom in which he can move in his thinking and feeling and being in any direction he desires. How does he use this freedom? It is my experience that he uses it to become more and more himself. He begins to drop the false fronts, or the masks, or the roles with which he has faced life. He appears to be trying to discover something more basic, something more truly himself. At first, he lays aside masks, which he is to some degree aware of using. One young woman student describes in a counseling interview one of the masks she has been using, and how uncertain she is whether underneath this appeasing, ingratiating front, there is any real self with convictions. I was thinking about this business of standards. I somehow developed a sort of knack, I guess, of, habit, of trying to make people feel at ease around me or to make things go along smoothly. There always had to be some appeaser around, being sort of an oil that soothed the waters. At a small meeting or a little party or something, I could help things go along nicely and appear to be having a good time. And sometimes I'd surprise myself by arguing against what I really thought when I saw that the person in charge would be quite unhappy about it if I didn't. In other words, I just wasn't ever, I didn't find myself ever being set and definite about things. Now, the reason why I did it probably was I'd been doing it around home so much. I just didn't stand up for my own convictions until I don't know whether I have any convictions to stand up for. I haven't been really honestly being myself, or actually knowing what my real self is, and I've been playing sort of a false role. You can, in this excerpt, see her examining the mask she has been using, recognizing her dissatisfaction with it, and wondering how to get to the real self underneath, if such self exists. In this attempt to discover his own self, the client typically uses the relationship to examine the various aspects of his own experience, to recognize and face up to the deep contradictions which he often discovers. He learns how much of his behavior, even how much of this feeling he is experiencing, is not real, is not something which flows from the genuine reactions of his organism, but as a facade, a front behind which he has been hiding. He discovers how much of his life is guided by what he thinks he should be, not by what he is. Often he discovers that he exists only in response to the demands of others, that he seems to have no sense of his own self, that he is only trying to think and feel and behave in a way that others believe he ought to think, feel, and behave. In this connection, I have been astonished to find how accurately the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard pictured the dilemma of the individual more than a century ago with keen psychological insight. He points out that the most common despair is to be in despair at not choosing or willing to be oneself, but that the deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than himself. On the other hand, to will to be that self which one truly is indeed the opposite of despair. And this choice is the deepest responsibility of man. As I have read some of his writings, I almost feel that he must have listened in on the statements made by our clients as they search and explore for the reality of self, often a painful and troubling search. This exploration becomes even more disturbing when they find themselves involved in removing the false faces, which they had not known were false faces. They begin to engage in the frightening task of exploring the turbulent and sometimes violent feelings within themselves. To remove the mask which you thought was part of your real self can be a deeply disturbing experience. But yet when there is freedom to think and feel and be, the individual moves towards such a goal. A few statements from a person who had completed a series of psychotherapeutic interviews will illustrate this. She uses many metaphors as she tells how she struggled to get to the core of herself. As I look at it now, I was peeling off layer after layer of defenses. I build them up, try them, and then discard them when you remain the same. I didn't know what was at the bottom and was very much afraid to find out, but I had to keep trying. At first, I felt there was nothing within me, just a great emptiness where I needed and wanted a solid core. Then I began to feel that I was facing a solid brick wall too high to get over and too thick to go through. One day, the wall became translucent rather than solid. After this, the wall seemed to disappear, but beyond it, I discovered a dam holding back violent churning waters. I felt as if I were holding back the force of these waters, and if I opened even a tiny hole, I and all about me would be destroyed in the ensuing torrent of feelings represented by the water. Finally, I could stand the strain no longer, and I let go. All I did actually was to succumb to complete and utter self-pity, then hate, then love. After this experience, I felt as if I had leapt a brink and was safely on the other side. Though still torrenting a bit on the edge, I don't know what I was searching for, where I was going, but I felt, as I have always felt whenever I've really lived, that I was moving forward. I believe this represents rather well the feelings of many an individual, that if the false front, the wall, the dam is not maintained, then everything will be swept away in the violence of the feelings that he discovers pent up in his private world. Yet it also illustrates the compelling necessity which the individual feels to search for and become himself. It also begins to indicate the way in which the individual determines the reality in himself, that when he fully experiences the feelings which at an organic level he is, as this client experienced her self-pity, hatred, and love, then he feels an assurance that he is being a part of his real self. And so end of reading for today, and I look forward to continuing on at the bottom third of 111 with the experiences of feeling. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us again.